about Illuminati, since the charting up ducks. Is it Disney mind control? Is this MK Ultra Deluxe? Occult Disney, go wish upon a star. Occult Disney, should know what to chat for. Occult Disney, Pineal Gland, Pinocchio. Occult Disney, as above, so below. Pinocchio seeks fun on Pleasure Island, where traffickers meet just for the mind. Captain Hook, a lost boy in Neverland, saving kids from Peter Pan's designs. Nemo feels to survive the Barracuda, and that nobody needs no one. Snow White never took another breath. Bird Prince, the angel of death has come. Occult Disney, we go from real to real. Occult Disney, Bohemian Grove and no more real. Occult Disney, ask about to Illuminati. Occult Disney, we teach occult to everybody. Occult Disney, go wish upon a star. Occult Disney, you know what to chat for. Oh, Occult Disney, Pineal Gland, Pinocchio. Yeah, yeah. Occult Disney, it's above, so below. Occult Disney, please enjoy the show.
Hello, welcome to the Occult Disney podcast. It's where we look into all of the worlds of animation, including Disney, and find the secrets inside. Sorry, I got like a doo-doom, like a notice like right in the middle of that, and my brain exploded. So that is the thing, though. Do you have that on your computer where the notices just come up? It doesn't record in a podcast like this, but you're just like, where am I? You know, it just resets reality for a second.
Every time I just find the thing that says never do this again to me.
Oh, okay. Anyway, I just reset reality, which is cool because that's what we do in the occult land. This is Matt here. Hi, it's Thomas there. You're already in. You're talking.
This video will self-destruct in 30 seconds.
We got to give it what, an hour and a half. We got to get through this.
This video will self-destruct in 90 minutes, give or take.
Yes, that sounds about right. It is The Incredibles today, which we are chasing this. I didn't realize this till this morning. It's like, we just did Finding Nemo. Now we're doing The Incredibles, which we're generally chronological. We're a little out of order here. So I'm checking what Disney product came out between the two. Okay, Brother Bear.
Decent. We've been decent about this. We've had a couple big jumps, but the biggest jumps we've done so far was to keep all the Studio Ghiblis kind of together so that we could do them in a block.
No, if anyone cares, it's Brother Bear, Teacher's Pet, and Home on the Range. Brother Bear, of which we haven't done quite yet, but there's not a lot of space between Finding Nemo and The Incredibles in actuality. And I am looking at the dates, and I am realizing this is actually the first Pixar I probably did not see in a movie theater. Because it came out, it would have been my first year in Japan, and I wouldn't have seen it because it would have been dub only, because animation in Japan, they just don't subtitle it like 99% of the time. So,
and I distinctly remember downloading this movie from Direct Connect, DC++, in the early 2000s from my uncle, and I was like the hero because I don't think it had even been released yet. And everyone was talking about wanting to see it, but like they didn't want to go to the movies. And anyways, I distinctly remember this as being like one of my height of noble sort of like Robin Hood style piracy.
That makes sense because you were saying that for Finding Nemo, which is the highest selling like animated DVD ever, I think. And then Incredibles is like the highest selling of 2005. So, you know, Pixar in the mid 2000s was definitely sort of the gold standard of home media at the time, all that sort of stuff.
It was novel. It was very novel. Like, even if you didn't know what to expect going in, a lot of people were going to see it just to see how far this type of animation had come so far. And I don't know if that happens as much now in 2024. Is it like an old person thing to say? But it almost felt like part of the draw of going to see Disney animation up until even around this time was to be like, oh, I wonder what their new techniques are. How clean is it going to be? How convincing is all the animation going to look? And it definitely transitioned from 2D to 3D, but it still comes with part of that. I guess the other good example would be Avatar, right? Avatar also marketed itself as come see how far we've come in CGI and 3D and all of the bells and whistles that I guess cinema has to offer.
Watching this one though, because we did Nemo last week, and I was like, I still like the movie a lot. It still looks good for the most part, but I could definitely see like the seams in the animation 20 years down the line. I'd say less so with The Incredibles, even now that they're doing humans, which is supposed to be more difficult to do in CGI, or well, back then at least.
Right. Well, I guess maybe as a rough, unofficial scale of grading the CG and the 3D quality, I'd say Little Nemo was maybe at like a PS3, and The Incredibles is maybe at a PS4. Maybe bump those down one, but give or take
That
a
sounds about
generation
right.
of PlayStation.
Yeah, I can see that. That sounds about right. But this one does have a little more of a timeless feel, I guess. I was looking at the production history of this, and it is kind of a weird one, directed by Brad Bird, who at this point is kind of an outsider at Pixar. And they gave him a whole movie, which you're kind of like, that's a little weird, but
Get dirt on someone. I'm calling.
Yeah, you know, 5 years earlier he'd made the Iron Giant. That was for Warner Brothers, not Disney, so we didn't cover it. But that was a massive commercial flop and major critical hit. So somehow that got him into the world of John Lasseter's orbit, where this movie actually was made largely with the same animators that did Iron Giant, all of them having to change from 2D to 3D. And a lot of them seeming happy about it. I don't know much about the process of animation, but apparently once you just have 3D models and you can turn your virtual camera around, it at least made Brad Bird happy to do that. So,
yeah, I mean, when it comes to the person putting the pencil to the paper and doing the actual illustrations, there might be a little bit more involved of transitioning from 2D to 3D. But if you're already in more of like a meta aspect of that, where you're directing and you're sort of delegating and you're understanding the movement and how the characters need to be conveyed and all the scenes and stuff, the transition from 2D to 3D is really not that horrible. And in fact, it's a nightmare for some, and it's sort of like a paradise for others, because you do, exactly as you mentioned, have the ability to be like, hey, let's actually spin that camera around a little bit slower, or let's, do this with the camera. And now the production managers, they have way more control than ever before, because previously there was a huge cost associated with saying, actually, let's move the camera, down 2 feet. Let's get this at like below a certain, height or a different perspective, because that means you're throwing out work that had happened. And now you just got to throw out renders. So there's a huge line in the sand here, where they have way more liberty to make these kind of changes and suggest things that normally would be off the table.
Yeah, one interesting thing with the early Pixar is kind of along those lines is they were the only movies where you could feel kind of okay watching them in full frame, because people didn't have widescreen TVs that 2004 yet, and they would actually readjust everything for the full frame. So it's not just pan and scan. They would just move everything closer and reanimate it. I guess reanimate. That sounds
well. And the other cool thing too, I guess, depending on your perspective, but like they can re-render the entire movie with different languages, so it's not overdubbed. Like the lips move correctly with all the new dialogue, and that's something also that you can't even really do in live action movies, or even in 2D. It's not quite as easy. You can still do it, but in 3D, if you've got the mouth rigged properly, as long as you've got a transcript that you can provide to it, now you just re-render every scene and it's in everyone's native language, and there's no feeling like it's been adopted into your culture, into your language, all the way down to, if they really want to, they can swap out assets. I know we're just talking about 3D in general here, but the Incredibles and Nemo, I think, are good examples of that. I think some of them, they did get re-renders depending on the language that the market it was being sent to. I could have sworn Toy Story is one of those.
Probably. I mean, maybe that's one of the reasons that films rarely get shown subtitled. I mean, animated films rarely get shown in subtitle in Japan because it's, well, we got the Japanese render. It's fine. Everything's great. Let's roll. I mean, they're like, mostly kids are going to watch this, so they don't want to read the subtitles. That's kind of the line of thinking, I believe. Here's a question.
And in 2024, that's changing now too, though, because now it's incredibly easy to use AI to change, especially if it's the same person, just changing how their mouth is moving. So I feel like the dub game is going to completely be revolutionized in the next few years.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe living in Japan, I hope some people will still want to be like, here's the original translation, blah, blah, because I like going to a theater. Here's a question. I'm not sure to what degree you can answer, actually, but I mean, I read a lot of film books and things like that. I have a handle on how live action directors work. I really don't know what the job of directing a 2D or 3D animated movie actually entails, because I'm thinking of someone on set talking to their production design, they go over, fix the lights, talk to the actors, that sort of thing. Right. Like what exactly does it mean to direct an animated film?
Well, so for example, if you were to say an art director, because there's all different directors, and like I guess the just straight up director role.
That's what I'm asking. It makes more sense what an art director is doing to me than what the director is doing.
Right. Well, I mean, just think about it. You just go one step up in the hierarchy. The director directs the art director and the music director and all the other directors. Like he directs directors. But one of the things that's usually implied, that's not always the case, but usually an art director is capable of doing nearly everything that anyone under him is capable of doing. So if he needed to, he could step in, like, move and like draw the thing or do the thing the way that they envision it, almost as like any kind of a lead role, like a managerial role. But then the director doesn't necessarily have that same thing. Like they can't do what the art director can do in terms of getting down and actually drawing and doing the sound design. They should be very familiar with it, but they do know how to art direct. They just might not know how to do the art part, but they can do the direct part. So that's always kind of been my experience, is that the straight up director is way more of a managerial role, even in like a creative environment like Disney, just because you don't necessarily have all the time in the world to get down and dirty and have creative opinions. Now, that said, there's been plenty of times when I've seen, not on the best projects, but where I've seen like a director or like an associate producer in some cases. The producers have even more of a nebulous role, but they're usually the ones that make sure that you contact and hire the right people. And if there's a problem with payroll, and they figure out, like they're just like nonstop problem solvers constantly. It's almost like an engineer in like a recording studio. You'd be surprised to find that, like, yeah, they do engineering, but a lot of the time they're just like finding out why like a buzz is coming from somewhere, like where the cable thing or why this thing isn't routed, like things that aren't necessarily in the job description but are incredibly vital to keeping a project on pace. So like the producers have part of that role, the directors have part of that role, but they all have this weird dynamic where they'll have like external influences. Like one of the worst examples is we had an associate producer on a project. Everything's good. Everyone loves it. He loves it. Everyone's getting sign off. And then they bring it home and they show it to like their 8-year-old niece or something. And the niece is like, I don't like that. She was wearing a purple dress. I think it should have been yellow. And then all of a sudden you're like changing your schedule around. You're canceling and rescheduling meetings to make this dress yellow. And everyone knows that, like, oh, this isn't a great idea, but since, you're higher up, since you've got that production role or whatever, director probably would not do that because it looks bad on the director and the producer if it starts running off the rails. But those associate directors, those associate producers, man, they're the ones that are just like, oh yeah, a little bird flew by, and I was like, hey, we should add a bird in this scene. I think I've brought this up before. We used to call it like I think it was like the purple sweater syndrome or something. And it was named after that guy's stupid niece.
Should have been purple's better anyway. Yeah, it's interesting to look at how the dynamics and the roles change. Like TV, now it's the producer's pretty much in the chair. You know, there's a showrunner and the director's a hired hand, right?
Right, and the directors are very often people that are in the show. They'll cycle through like the top billing cast, and everyone gets a shot to direct an episode or two, which I think is kind of cool. And I guess in live action, it's a little bit more obvious, but like the director will tend to buddy up next to whatever they really want to do. So a lot of the time it's more obvious when the director wants to buddy up to the director of photography, right? Because like now all of a sudden they're the ones that are deciding where all the shots are going to be. Stanley Kubrick would be a really great example where if you see any of the behind the scenes footage of Stanley Kubrick, he's always got a camera lens like in front of his eye. Like there's rarely does he not have this whole camera lens set up, and he had a whole custom little thing so that he could look through the exact lens that he wanted to shoot a scene in, and would just constantly be taking looks from all these different perspectives and angles. I don't know if everyone can be equated to Stanley Kubrick for obvious reasons, right? But that was like his version of being a director, was being an expert on everything, like like literally everything in the entire. He probably dictated like what the room smelled like, even though they were like, Stanley, smell-o-vision isn't out yet. The CIA won't let us release it. And he's like, that's okay. I still need to make these notes.
How do we? No, I was trying to think of the first smell-o-vision. Is that polyester? You get the card, you scratch and sniff. Might be. I'm not sure.
Is it the real thing that you went to the theater and you got to scratch and sniff that you'd smell it?
There's been a few movies for that. Spy Kids All the Time in the World, I believe, did that.
Really?
Yeah. And occasionally they'll do the scratch and sniff card. But yeah, I guess Disney does the real smell-o-vision. You go and ride Soarin' and they're pumping in smells.
That was the only examples that when I've gone to Disney World, they've got smell. And even the alien encounter thing, they would intentionally pump in certain smells. Even on Universal Studios, the King Kong ride, I can't remember what
banana breath
called. King Kong
confrontation.
Well, not just banana breath, but the subway ambiance. They would pipe in like hydraulic smell,
that urine smell.
Yeah, like
pump it in from the bathroom.
Yeah, they just pump it in from the actual bathrooms and make it smell. But yeah, I mean, again, the olfactory sense is one of the most triggering. So the fact that it's so underutilized too in movies and media consumption, we still don't really have smell-o-vision. But it's crazy because smell-o-vision would actually elevate things to such a higher level that it has to be more of like a practicality thing.
They do have the 4DX movies. I have not been to one. I'm pretty sure you haven't because you don't like the theater. But those are where you're basically getting into a theme park ride chair for your movie, and it's spraying water in your face. I think some sensor involved. Okay, you've done them. Okay, I have not. So
there was a place called the Museum in Washington D.C. for a while. I think they closed within the last 10 years, but they had a whole series of different, and often you'll go to like a museum that's been retrofitted with some modern stuff. They'll typically have some kind of a 4D experience. I'm a fan of them if it's like there's nothing else to do in the stupid museum. And also those 4D movies that I'm used to are more like 20-minute experiences and not necessarily like a 2-hour experience. I don't know how I would feel about like
3 hours of Batman v Superman.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
So yeah, I don't want the water getting sprayed in my face. And the other thing I guess I was kind of thinking is just that question in the first place. I'm like, well, he goes from this, he does another Pixar, I believe. It then goes on and makes Mission Impossible 4, which is live action, right? So I'm like, how do those? And we were actually just watching that here last week. So
Mission Impossible 4?
Yeah. So I'm kind of directly comparing the two.
Well, I've got a whole other tangent that I won't go too far on, but that I recently did a video breakdown with my friend PJ from Conspiracy Pilled podcast, which you can go and probably check out on Rumbles, I think, where most of their audience is at. But we had a whole breakdown of how the Mission Impossible movie series are actually a soft disclosure of the information that Scientology got from when it infiltrated the CIA's private records under Operation Snow White. And that even the very date in the first Mission Impossible movie on this surveillance camera, as the movie opens up and they show this, surveillance that they got, that's the exact date in which Scientology lost a court case to suppress information that had come out about all of their deeds, and it was kind of like a landmark case in that it was the first chink in the armor. It was the first time it was like, water doesn't always roll off your back, apparently. So anyways, there's a fun thread there that the entire Mission Impossible series is about the CIA, but it's not about the CIA from the perspective of the CIA, but from the perspective of Scientology, hence Tom Cruise being directly involved.
And here I was thinking the whole series was just about Tom Cruise not having friends.
I mean, that too, but you can't have friends if you're like a CIA agent, right? Because now they're all in danger constantly.
Oh, no, I'm talking about Tom Cruise, not his character, Ethan Hunt.
Well, same difference, I would argue.
Yeah. Although 4 was kind of like, hey, if this doesn't work, Jeremy Renner's here and can take, if Tom doesn't want to do it again, here's Jeremy Renner. Maybe he could be the front guy.
Never.
No, that actually was kind of the thought when they made 4, like, this could be a soft reboot. Like if Tom doesn't want to do it anymore or something, we got this other guy now. That was kind of the point of him being in the movie. But I guess
he hasn't gone clear, so I don't think there's any comparison.
Yeah. I don't know what's up with Renner.
He's not an OTA. I don't think he's an OTA.
Let's turn the dial backward just a little bit. Have you seen The Iron Giant? I'll say I have not, to be honest. So
I probably saw it around the time that it came out, but not recently enough to speak on it.
Okay, I haven't seen it. It's supposed to be, people still say it's like, oh, it's one of the best animated films ever, but I haven't gotten around to it. So oops. I go pick it up at the store near here. But it would be interesting to track from there to here to Mission Impossible 4. And then I got to check what he made in between. Jeez.
I mean, better than Fritz the Cat in Cool World? I doubt it.
Oh, yeah, of course not. Some people cite this as being the best Fantastic Four film. We have 3, almost 4 of those now. And I guess that's right, because aren't the 3 Fantastic Four films basically unwatchable?
Are we talking about The Incredibles is the best Fantastic Four film?
Yes.
I don't know. I don't think that I can't see The Incredibles as Fantastic Four, just because Fantastic Four's got so much more DNA in it than this particular premise. That said, I don't think there's ever been a good Fantastic Four movie. There's been many attempts. I think there might even be on their 3rd try, and 3rd time might be the charm. But
I think
really,
on the 4th. Well, if you're counting, there was a sequel the first time, so it could be 3rd. Okay.
Well, that one doesn't count. Like, it has to be an official reboot. So yeah,
okay.
I think the 4th time would probably be the charm on this.
Well, now it has the massive MCU backing. Robert Downey Jr. strutting. It'll at least have a good opening day, if nothing else.
Yeah, I don't even know if that helps. But then again, I mean, I grew up in a different time when the Punisher movie didn't seem like it was anything about the Punisher. And then there was like an Avengers movie, and that didn't seem, and I don't mean the British Avengers, even though that also was disappointing, thinking that you were going to see Marvel and it's like Sean Connery with doing British things.
No, sorry, Fantastic Four 1994. We can't forget that one. Ever seen that?
Yeah, that one. Yeah. That one doesn't. I mean, I guess it kind of counts because it wasn't one of those retrofitted Super Mario 2 movies where it was one thing and then they just changed it to be something that had more appeal. Like that actually was supposed to be Fantastic Four. But I also remember the one that I think broke a little bit of ground and set a new trajectory was the first X-Men movie, which was, I don't know, 98, 99, maybe 2000.
2000, yeah.
And even that one, I mean, it was cheesy. It was bad.
It was still a little embarrassed to be a comic book movie.
Even when it
dug in a lot more.
Because I remember, like, it was not a controversial statement to say that the animated series was superior to the live action movie. Because they were more true to a lot of the characters. And anyways, I think that's just another sort of aspect that goes into it.
I never watched much of the animated series. 1, I was aging out. And 2, I'd read the Chris Claremont run of X-Men probably like multiple times. And, it was all like those storylines kind of like distilled into 30-minute clumps, right? So I was like, I want to stick with my comic books in that case. But
it was a specific time. You can almost tell what generation of comic reader you were on how much you gave a hell about Jubilee. because Jubilee was sort of like you might have been old, like too old to care about Jubilee. I
read about comic book Jubilee. She was around. I could tell you exactly if for anyone that's a hardcore comic book geek, I tapped out at Executioner's Song. That's where I stopped reading the comic.
Okay,
book.
so wasn't that Strife and Silver Samurai era too?
Yes,
right around when Wolverine goes to Japan, ironically. You jumped out when Wolverine goes to Japan? Come on, man.
Oh, he went to Japan in the 80s, man. And then he went back.
Right. No, you're right.
He goes
you're
to Japan all
right.
the time.
Okay.
But yeah, the point is that all the comic book talk does fit this movie because it is kind of a out of left field comic book movie. Just there's no comic it was based on, it's all, I guess that's the thing, you have a blank slate, so you don't have to like which parts of the X-Men aesthetic are we going to put into this live action movie, which parts are we not. Here, it's like start from scratch and make it mid-century modern, which I'm a big fan of. So I love goofy 60s design, weird fake wood paneling and all those sort of things, which we get drowned in this movie. So
back when men were men, women were women,
and everyone smelled like cigarettes.
Right. And there's, aside from just having that aesthetic, but even as the movie starts out, it has that like 1960s school projector look to it. Like they've recorded some of these interviews, but even the interviews themselves clearly were recorded in the 50s or the 60s as you see it. So it's tapping into the golden years of the CIA ultimately.
Yeah, actually that is an interesting thing. When is this movie set? I'm guessing about 1980, maybe early 80s probably, because their superhero run seems to be in the mid 60s basically. That's what I'm reading. I think Incredibles 2 might actually set some dates on it, but I've only seen that movie once shortly after it came out, so I don't remember.
I would almost think that it could have even been 90s because of the visor and the outfit that the only black superhero in the movie has. I don't know. I guess, yeah, it could be an ambiguous 80s to 90s sort of time period. Yeah.
Frozone. Got to get the name in there. They definitely, except for the family themselves, they definitely have, well, I don't know, Elastigirl's fine, but what else? Bon Voyage. I had forgotten about that name. That's wonderful.
And Dash, yeah.
Dash isn't that great a name, but yeah, it's fine. It's fine. You got to have your super speedster, I guess. So,
I guess there are very specific archetypes and tropes when it comes to superheroes. Like if you're going to do the traditional superhero route, you got to have strength, stretch, invisibility, super speed. Like these are just kind of the meat and potatoes of everything.
A little fire. We don't get the fire here, but that's fine. We only have 4 people. I don't know. I guess Jack can do anything he wants, right? So they keep that relatively vague. There is a short film actually, Jack Attack, which shows what happens with the babysitter while they're off on the the syndrome layer or whatever. So that's kind of a fun short that does dovetail nicely with the movie. This is maybe a golden age of Pixar shorts, because that was good on the DVD. Bounden was the short that they showed with this, and then that's kind of fun, I guess. Did you watch Bounden at any point?
I don't even know what that is.
I think it's just a horse or something clomping around. It's been a while since I watched it. I did not watch it for this.
This is a Disney movie?
Yeah, so like I don't know if Pixar still does this, because I haven't seen a Pixar movie in the theater since 2009, but they used to have the like 5-minute short before all the Pixar movies. So, and then there are DVDs of Pixar shorts.
Even was it Roger Rabbit, or it might have been Honey, I Shrunk the Kid. One of those 2 movies had Family Dog before it, which is one of my all-time favorite pre-movie shorts.
I know, and I think you're complaining because I think they put a Roger Rabbit cartoon before Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. And then maybe Roger Rabbit itself, they showed the Family Dog, I don't remember.
Roger Rabbit was short before Honey, I Shrunk the Kids?
No, after Roger Rabbit, they made about 3 or 4 Roger Rabbit shorts.
Okay, I don't even remember that.
A few movies. Yeah, Roger Rabbit's, I mean, we talked about it for 2 hours last year, but it is it's weirdly forgotten
time to talk about Roger Rabbit. I don't care.
It is. like I was listen to people talk about the ride, the Toontown Spin, and they're kind of like, is Disney does Disney just not know what to do with Jessica Rabbit now? You know, because Disney's just become so like sexually sterile. You know, what do you do with Jessica Rabbit?
You pretend that she doesn't exist. It's not her fault. She was just drawn that way. Also, really quick, fun trivia fact, but the Roger Rabbit, what was it, Toontown Spin ride in LA, in Disneyland. I don't think it was in Disney World. It is the site of one of the most gruesome in-park deaths ever recorded.
We did talk about that. I remember.
Somebody got caught under one of the little cars, and it just turned him into a crayon.
Yeah. And I guess we probably mentioned in that episode too that they've covered up Jessica Rabbit animatronic. She's now wearing a yellow raincoat in the LA version of the ride, whereas in Tokyo she's still, you know, is wearing her
she's giving
dress and coming out of the back of the car
in Japan.
yeah, exactly, yes. But yeah, we're getting Incredibles. They have an Incredible coaster, I guess, but they don't have like a proper dark ride, which this does seem like it would make sense to have a nice dark ride, you know, unless there's one like Shanghai or something I don't know about, which could be the case.
So this particular IP came out way after I was caring as much about Disney, for sure, and I haven't kept up on the Incredibles storyline just because I had my own superheroes that I grew up with. But there's definitely a whole generation that might have grown up with this as their entry point into the concept of superheroes. And I just wonder if this has any lasting IP whatsoever. I know there's been a sequel. Isn't there even another one that's supposed to be coming out, Incredibles?
Disney is now just make sequels of everything, so probably like, do not try something new. We are falling down the slippery slope of nobody caring about our movies. So give them Frozen 3.
I will say, if we're taking votes for any reason, I'm pro Incredibles because in the first 3 minutes of this movie, we've got a shootout, which you don't really see in Disney movies ever. And I don't even know if we would see another one. Maybe this was just the tail end of a horrible, violent period in American history. But it's sometimes it's refreshing to see actual guns being used and shooting, like criminals shooting guns at cops and vice versa in a Disney movie. It just makes it feel like it's part of more of a real world. And I guess some people go to Disney movies to be transported away to like a magical kingdom. But sometimes you got to see Oliver and Friends, right? Sometimes you got to see aristocrats or Aristocats.
I mean, most people still see like a James Bond movie as a form of escapism. I guess this is at an interesting juncture point where the James Bond sort of thing is still considered to be the big budget class film, but superheroes are just starting to get a little bit popular. Iron Man's still 4 years in the future, so it's kind of a weird gray area where they do. I mean, maybe it's stroke of genius. Let's mix the old with the new because that's where this kind of movie is at the moment.
Well, and if you think, especially when it comes to cinema or just like pop culture waves, if you think in terms of 30 years, which is typically a generation. So if this is getting popular in 2004, just the initial scratch of the X-Men movie came out, and then 4 years later, the
Spider-Man's out by this point too. So
Spider-Man comes out, and that one actually is an incredible success, right? But this is roughly 30 years after this new wave of Marvel, around like the mid 70s to 80s. I guess as Dazzler made her way out, and if people don't know who Dazzler is, but it was like a disco inspired character that was very much a product of their time. It was almost like if they were a dubstep, superhero. It would just
they updated her for a time too, because she starts off looking like super disco, and by the 80s she's kind of like glam MTV star, right?
Well, she was supposed to be Donna Summer, but someone was like, a little too dark. We need to lighten her up. But Dazzler, no. I believe, was originally modeled directly off Donna Summer.
That would track for sure. Although maybe the bet, well, this movie was very successful, but it was not in the ballpark of Finding Nemo before it and Cars after it. So this flavor wasn't quite as appealing as, say Cars, which I think this is a much better movie than Cars. Cars is kind of considered to be Pixar's first artistic, not stumble, but, like they lost the step maybe there.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves because I've got plenty of opinions on Cars. But yeah,
Okay.
just because the baby food version of steak or rice pilaf sells better than real rice pilaf doesn't necessarily mean it's better in any way.
Okay, that's a great analogy there. You were noticing the movie opening of the shootout, which didn't track with me, but what tracked with me is the whole opening of this is kind of like Watchmen Light, which that's like kind of the darkest of superhero comic books, and them being banned, sued out of existence as superheroes.
I was going to even go with Boys, which is maybe even darker than Watchmen. Watchmen is like 80s dark, but Boys is like 2000s dark, right? And I don't know if you've even watched any of the recent Boys.
I haven't seen any of the Boys.
Have you read the Boys?
No, I haven't. That's a pretty blind spot for me. I certainly know about it. I know how dark it's supposed to get, but yeah, that's why I'm still like Watchmen, because I haven't spent time with the Boys yet.
So I mean, yeah. So Watchmen is probably a better analogy for The Incredibles, because the Watchmen is that society has gotten fed up in a general sense with superheroes. In the Boys, it almost takes it a step further. Let's say like your society is sick of superheroes a la Watchmen, but they keep doing stuff, and not only are they doing stuff, but now all this collateral damage is really starting to affect people. So collateral damage, like Superman throws a car out of the way to make sure it doesn't hit a baby, but you don't see that the car lands on like someone's parents elsewhere. So now all of a sudden you've got this orphaned kid that grows up with a chip on his shoulder that just all he wants to do is take down Superman because their parents were part of collateral damage. I think this was even one of the subplots in the Smallville series. There was a character that like went down this route, but the Boys just takes that to the extent where now all of a sudden normal people are becoming vigilantes, which is kind of the premise of The Incredibles 2, this first movie, where they've got this guy that he wants to basically be Incrediboy. This is Buddy Pines, but the Mr. Incredible doesn't want a sidekick, so he keeps kind of rebuking this poor little kid, and then he ends up becoming a vigilante, like a normal, abled, non-superhero vigilante that has made it his mission to take down superheroes because of how they've dismissed him.
And we should mention, especially in adult form, he is based on director Brad Bird, apparently. So he's putting himself in the movie as the villain with a chip on the shoulder.
So redhead with freckles.
Yeah. They were modeling him after Brad. So I don't think Brad did the voice. Oh, of course Brad didn't do the voice. Voice was Jason Lee, was it? Have a quick look at that. Cast. Oh, I'm looking at casting. Voice cast. Jason Lee. Yes, Jason Lee. So coming off all those Kevin Smith movies.
Yeah, this is My Name is Earl, Jason Lee, who started as a professional skateboarder, I believe.
Correct. He could have a third run, I guess, of career at this point. I don't know. I haven't seen him in a while.
Might have been in Tony Hawk. Yeah, he needs to come back. Was it like David Arquette and just start doing WWE?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Although I guess he'd probably do the skating stuff. That would make more sense. But what was it? Oh, yeah. I remember back in the day, maybe it could show up now. Maybe that's what Tarantino can do for his 10th film. There's always the talk, well, there could be a Kill Bill sequel when the Uma Thurman kills whatever her name is and the daughter's there. And they're like, the sequel would be like 15, 20 years later, right? When she comes to get her revenge.
It would be great if Quentin Tarantino's last movie was a Pixar movie.
There was a talk for a while it was going to be a Star Trek movie, although that's now fallen through the floor. But that would have been interesting. I don't know if that would have been good, but that would have been interesting for sure.
Well, would you think a Seth MacFarlane Star Trek would be any good?
That turned out to be pretty good. I will support the Orville. Yeah. I think the Orville is probably better than 90% of New Trek. So, right on. Let's see. Look through your. Oh, I guess as we start to look through concepts, there's definitely this movie tries to give us a very specific, the government is shoving you under the rug, the witness protection program thing, which is made to seem here, to be like mind crushing, soul crushing, and depressing. So that's kind of an interesting take. I don't know. Maybe Mr. Incredible is just not zen enough. He needs to, find a new hobby or something, which he does, but it's just his old job again. So.
Well, it's a literal interpretation of the Ubermensch meets in On Rand, where basically you've got an actual Ubermensch, you have an actual superhero, right, Mr. Incredible, that can do all these incredible things, but he's being forced by mediocre society to sort of like limit himself because normal society looks upon anything that is superior to itself as basically with contempt, right? So like this kind of plays out where now he drives a tiny little car that he can barely fit in. He has to be an insurance adjuster, and even in his role as insurance adjuster, he knows that his directive is to screw people over every way that he can. And now his superpower is kind of telling people how to fill out their insurance claims so that they won't get denied. So like it shows that he's still trying to like do good in this world, but it's the government and it's society itself that's not letting him do anything. And it really is almost out of like a jealousy or like a fear of the unknown. But I think that this also kind of plays around with, they are also intelligence operatives, right? Like the Incredibles are basically CIA agents. So this is also almost like a pro CIA movie. This is like, oh, come on, we're so good at what we do. Don't neuter us. Don't prevent any of this from happening, which is kind of that mid-century modern era. That was when they had carte blanche, they had free reign. The church committee hearings had not really happened yet, which is also roughly a 30-year span. That's that one generation, right? Like I think 74 or something.
Paperclip guys are good at design.
Right. Well, Paperclip would have been the era in which we originally see the characters as they're doing those initial interviews and they're like brand new in the game. So this gets a little bit deep, but some people, hopefully a lot of people, have heard about COINTELPRO. Have you heard about COINTELPRO?
Yes, but I couldn't do the talk you're doing myself.
So the COINTELPRO was the FBI's program about sort of squashing protests and civil rights movements and any sort of civil protest movements that were going on in any capacity, anti-war, any of them. The FBI had this COINTELPRO, and I believe one of their claims of infame, not fame, I guess, was getting dirt on Martin Luther King Jr. and maybe even blackmailing him and telling him to do horrible things to himself or else, ... Well, the FBI's version of that, because the FBI is the intelligence part of the government that operates domestically, like amongst our own, right? Like they go after Americans typically. The CIA is kind of supposed to be like the FBI, except they have global and international reach, and they're not technically supposed to work domestically because we've got ATF, DEA, FBI, like all these other organizations are supposed to do domestically. Well, why am I even bringing any of this up? What does it have to do with Incredibles? Well, that's because FBI's COINTELPRO is fairly it's been mentioned in more media and more documentaries, and I guess it's a little bit easier to come across. But there was a CIA counterpart that happened at the same time as FBI COINTELPRO that was also run domestically, which is atypical for the CIA to admit that they did domestic programs. And it was called Project Chaos, I believe. And Project Chaos was of similar nature. It was squash any sort of uprisings here domestically and maybe trace them to outside the country, which I think was just their foot in the door to be like, oh, no, technically we're allowed to spy on our own people because it's international concerns. The reason I'm bringing this up is because this is precisely what the Incredibles movie is about. The Incredibles movie, as you watch it, they make it seem like, oh, there's a guy robbing a bank. Oh, there's someone that's going to jump off a building. Oh, they're like a train's about to go off of this bridge. So they're just constantly saving people. But really what the actual version of Project Chaos would be is sending CIA agents out to just quell anyone that was, hey, there's a bridge that's out. I'm going to protest this bridge being out. the CIA wouldn't send someone to fix the bridge. They would send someone to take out the guy that's like, hey, this bridge is broken. And as I'm watching The Incredibles, that's what I'm thinking is like, these are all placeholders. When Mr. Incredible saves the dude from jumping out of the window and he like pushes him into the building, and coincidentally that ends up being the thing that gets people to start suing all of the superheroes, is because he saves this guy that was trying to take himself out. But that is actually a stand-in for what they were really doing, which was pushing people off of buildings. Like that guy falling, that was probably Frank Olson of MK Ultra fame.
I was about to bring him up. Oh, absolutely. Although you could also say that The Incredibles in the 60s or 70s or whatever it was, they could have been like the smoke screen, because a couple superheroes can do really impressive things that people would notice. And meanwhile, your 100 other agents are doing whatever while you're distracting the masses with superheroes.
Yeah,
exactly. The Incredibles could be there, look over there. And then, oh, they saved a baby or something. That's great, you know, until it wasn't, until they got sued. That's where the whole thing broke down. And maybe at that point, the CIA doesn't need the distraction anymore. So, I mean, they don't in the real world, at least in terms of superheroes, they don't.
So yeah, and I guess in my mind, the time span in which the Incredibles are growing up, like when we see those original interviews, that's probably the transition of OSS to CIA, which I think is 1947. I think OSS was 1942. 5 years later, 1947, and the guy that's in charge of this Project Chaos, I think this is kind of the dude that the Incredibles, they sit down and they meet with him in the back of the limo, which kind of looks like the limo that maybe JFK got taken out of. But anyways, they drive around this stretch black limo talking to this guy. And I think that he's supposed to be modeled after Deep Throat, the actual Deep Throat, because that guy, which there's been many different claims as to who Deep Throat was. And in case I'm losing you, this is a reference to the Richard M. Nixon impeachment and the Watergate scandal. And
oh yeah, I've read the book. I've watched the movie, but for other people.
for other people. So Deep Throat is the alleged person that broke the story, the insider that gave the whole thing up for their own political reasons, probably. But there's a lot of theories. There's from this one book called Catherine the Great, but they propose that there's this guy Richard Ober who was Deep Throat, and Richard Ober was the guy that was in charge of Project Chaos, which was the CIA's version of FBI's COINTELPRO, who was directly connected to a lot of the JFK assassination stuff and all this. But what I think is interesting about this is that he worked directly with LBJ. I think he was appointed by LBJ to head up this Project Chaos thing, but he gets his own office in the White House. So this isn't even like super covert behind closed doors and secret caverns kind of thing. Like he has an actual desk right there in the White House itself, which is the closest endorsement of a sitting president telling the CIA, yes, spy on domestic people, have domestic operations here in the country, even though that you're CIA. And that is the closest correlation that I've kind of got that lines up with the time period that we're talking about, because Project Chaos allegedly stopped in around 74, which just also coincidentally coincides with the church committee hearings in which it became public. So, of course, everything that became public, they were like, oh, no, we stopped doing that last night. That's crazy that you just brought it up. We just stopped. You know what I mean?
Never mind the parts we redacted.
Yeah, exactly. Never mind there's an Incredibles part 2 that comes out. That's not soft disclosure. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, although I guess that is a president that would distract people with his Johnson. So
isn't he one of the guys that would like have press conferences on the toilet? Was that LBJ?
Yeah, I guess he was really into measuring contests because he'd whip it out all the time, apparently, which kind of weird presidential move. But hey, and when you're in the elites, there's lots of weird traditions, I suppose.
If you helped take down a sitting president, wouldn't you just be flopping it out all the time? Be like, dude, come on. I took out JFK and I got away with it. Look at this thing. Bloop.
I'm the pres now.
Yeah.
It's me. So that's neither here nor there. But let's see. Yeah, for that first part of the movie, they do have the fantastic quote, like what new ways to celebrate mediocrity. So I had to write that one down.
Well, and another thing too that goes on the same analogy that they're just CIA agents, which I don't even think you have to look into. This isn't even an occult decode. This is just literally the premise of the actual movie.
Well, in the MCU now, that literally is the Avengers now. Aren't the Avengers technically at some point they got the Illuminati like council giving them orders and stuff, right? I mean, they don't. It's not like this stuff is even covert in the movies now, right? It's pretty much on the table.
Well, and the part that I think is interesting in The Incredibles, in part of this like disclosure, is that when they have to stop going out and taking out citizens because the church committee hearings happen, so now they have to go back and just do paperwork. But that's literally what happens, right? They take the agents out of the field, they put them inside of a big building somewhere behind a desk, and now they're just doing paperwork and traversing this Kafka-esque labyrinth of red tape. And that's exactly what they have Mr. Incredible doing. Is an insurance adjuster. He's basically this neutered CIA agent that's no longer allowed to operate in the field and has to kind of do it from behind a desk.
Have you heard of a movie called The Lives of Others? It's a German movie.
No.
Came out about 2006. It was the first dramatic German movie to deal with the Stasi in East Germany.
I have been there. I've actually been to the Stasi headquarters.
Oh, okay. But yeah, it's about a guy that's supposed to, spy on a playwright because his boss basically wants to hook up with the playwright's girlfriend, not because the playwright is doing anything against the state. But he starts to like these people and starts ignoring things. But of course, he's got people spying on him because everyone spies on everyone in the Stasi. And it's the Incredibles version, except he's got a suburban life, it's fine, he's doing insurance, where this movie just makes it depressing that the guy is basically sent to the basement, steam and open envelopes. He's now opening envelopes with steam. That's his new job, right? Because he didn't do his spying well enough, which could kind of be this too, but it's made like, oh, it's America, they're trying to, he's in this like existentially boring life, but they got him set up, it's fine, right? And it's like, well, I don't know, they crushed his soul still, which in the lives of others, it's like, yes, his soul has been crushed. He
Right, but he's not a regular citizen. He is an actual Ubermensch, right? So he's this caged bird in a way of potential, and it's also my favorite aspect of the whole movie, I guess, which is it's harder to rant about this particular part for hours and hours, but I think it's deserving of it. But it's ultimately society that causes this problem. It's not even the government in the context of the Incredibles movie, right? It's the people that are getting saved see this as a quick way to make a buck because there's a loophole in the system that they're allowed to sue these superheroes for all these things that go wrong. And I guess the superheroes, because they are CIA agents, literally, the people are indirectly suing the government itself. So the government in response just says, okay, no more superheroes. Like you're not allowed to have your life saved anymore because you're going to sue us if we save your life. So it's like the inverse of the final Seinfeld episode.
Right. Well, this is a pre-Disney Plus world. Disney's figured it out now. They can't get sued anymore when you die.
Right. Sorry, you've signed up for Disney Plus.
Hey, I've never signed up for Disney Plus. I'm good to go. There's got to be another loophole somewhere. The lawyers can find a
reason
loophole.
to pirate Disney movies. I didn't say that. That's something that I heard. I'm repeating.
Well, let's move a little deeper into the film, I guess. So, of course, Mr. Incredible just gets his mojo back somewhat, loses some weight, lies to his wife, all of that sort of stuff, gets a costume. This movie has infiltrated my subconscious, though, because I wrote several times Edna Head, which is just a mishmash of the inspiration and the character in the movie. So are you a costume guy? Maybe that's why you didn't like the first X-Men movie so much. Costumes are crap.
Yeah, now that you pointed out, it did bug me quite a bit. And in fact, almost all superhero movies up until Iron Man were all really kind of cheesy looking. Like they never really had quite a superhero look. And in fact, and I know we might as well just talk about a bunch of different superheroes. That's literally what Incredibles is. But the Daredevil series, I think it was a Netflix thing originally. That was one of the first times that I saw a outfit that looked kind of accurate to the original version that you saw in comic books that didn't look totally cheesy. Unlike say the Daredevil movie with Ben Affleck and the Elektra with Jennifer Garner and all the like. They tried, but there was something about it that just didn't look right. Like the fits weren't right, or there was a weird combination of CGI and not CGI. But this one, I guess it's serviceable.
Maybe it helped that Daredevil went the first season with him not wearing a costume. If you remember, he's just running around in black, and so they had time to.
All the fight scenes were very dark, which makes sense though because it's a nod to like him being blind, so it works in a bunch of ways. And then they would happen in like tight quarters too.
Yeah, but he doesn't get that costume till the end of season 1, if I remember correctly. So
I think you're right. Yeah,
they had extra time to work it out, so that's nice. But yeah, I guess this is the first time. It is a weird thing. I think Pixar is in this weird gray area where they're raking in the bucks and getting everyone to come see their movies because it's like in a weird space somewhere closer to live action movies, right? Again, adults are going to see this where they're nobody went to see Home on the Range, right? Which, as we learned a few weeks ago. So this is everyone's going to see it. It kind of has the prestige of, a proper blockbuster, which is kind of the hat trick Pixar is pulling off around this time.
Well, one of the notes that I made as I was watching this is like, wow, this is almost like a real movie. It feels less like a Disney movie. It's got plot points that kind of had me engaged quite a bit. I didn't even necessarily hate that it's also one of the longer non-Ghibli bit movies. I think this one came out to like a minute or an hour and 55 minutes.
Yeah, that's right. But there is something to once you start doing proper comic book suits. Sometimes the superhero costume is more powerful than the superpowers. My exhibit is from the New Mutant Cypher, who gets shot quickly in the New Mutants comic book.
I could have sworn you were going to bring up Blank Man.
Oh, I'm sure I should have seen that movie, but I have not seen Blank Man.
You have not seen Blank Man?
I know I should have seen Blank Man, but I haven't.
Oh, you missed the window. I'm sad to say it's one of those movies that does not hold up over time. But if you saw it within 4 years or so of it coming out, it really was something special.
Well, I just rewatched Spice World and got that dopamine hit from that. So that's one that where I don't think I think you had to have watched it within probably 1 year of its release,
If you can transport yourself back to when Blank Man came out, which I think was kind of height of In Living Color.
Yeah, it was like 97, 98. That's why I thought Spice World.
Yeah. Last Boy Scout, I think, had come out. Marlon Wayans had done, not Marlon, but the older one, that he had started doing like serious movies too. But yeah, highly recommend Blank Man.
Yes. Oh, fun Marlon fact that we learned recently. He was going back and forth between the sets of Dungeons and Dragons 2000 and Requiem for a Dream. They were filming at about the same time. So, I don't know if anyone's seen Dungeons and Dragons 2000. You don't need to, though you should look up Dungeons and Dragons 2000 and Jeremy Irons just to watch the Jeremy Irons scenes because those are amazing. He's just screaming gibberish as dramatically as he can. It's a magic moment.
I'm trying to think of a Requiem for a Dream Incredibles tie here, but maybe it's just too dark to go. But yeah, one of the few movies that I legitimately feel like I have to take a shower after I've seen it. There's something that it just does that makes me feel like a complete dirty person.
But yeah, I just wanted to do some costume talk here. I thought that was probably worth. This is a good cinematic place to start noticing it because it's the first time they're willing to put stupid comic book stuff, like you said, unfiltered onto the screen. Spider-Man being a weird outlier. I think Spider-Man got most of it probably because it's Sam Raimi. Of course, he's doing that was kind of the excuse of the time. Spider-Man
got a pass too because they had they broke the mold. They were like one of the first ones that didn't do it super cheesy. It was fairly accurate to the original. Aside, I can't remember, they didn't do Marissa Tomei in the first.
No, those are the MCU ones. There's the Tom Holland ones.
It was old lady, Aunt May, right?
I forget who. Yeah, that's the funny thing. Aunt May keeps getting younger in each iteration because in the Andrew Garfield one, it's Sally Field, right?
I'm not going to argue. I get it. But it's not canon.
And I just remember Uncle Ben because he keeps showing up in Twilight Zone episodes I watch. So he liked to hang out in the Twilight Zone. Oh God, why is his?
There is a point in here too, though. But so I'm not the Democrat. Despite being a comic book publisher and obsessed with comic books, I kind of don't like spandex superhero comics. Even when I was younger, I always thought the cooler episodes of X-Men was just like Wolverine wearing a jacket and jeans and just like kicking ass with Omega Red. Yeah, like, or even I guess even the Japanese versions and stuff. But so for that reason, the Incredibles movie, I don't like the really cheesy, very predictable spandex superhero outfits. Although I guess from like an aesthetic point of view, you can just see it out of the corner of your eye for a fraction of a second and realize, oh, superhero.
Yes, I mean and they're all iconed up. I do actually like the Incredibles 2 gets to their costumes look different thing, the all matching thing. I mean, that's I guess why you start thinking Fantastic Four. Also, there's 4 of them if you don't count the baby. So, well, Fantastic Four have a baby, so yeah, they still have the baby around. That's Franklin Richards, right? Who can do anything the plot requires, just like Jack.
And they do. They have an invisible. They have a stretch. They have super strong. I guess in this case, Mr. Incredible would kind of be like Thing as their strong one, right?
Yeah. They're missing the fire, I guess, but they got Frozone with the ice. Although he's a side character, obviously.
Frozone.
Yeah, I can't. It just rolls off your tongue. It feels good to say Frozone, Much more than, well, I like saying Mr. Incredible in Japanese, which is how I have to say the movie if I'm talking to a Japanese person.
Otherwise, they won't know what the hell you're saying.
They will not know what I'm saying if I say The Incredibles. They have no clue what that is. Oh, Mr. Incredible. Oh, yeah, I know that movie. So
this movie also features one of my favorite novelty conspiracy theories that birds are not real. That's actually one of the original plot points as they're keeping tabs on Mr. Incredible. The people that are basically hiring him, and they show this scene where a bird flies down, it lands, and it's like looking at him, but then it zooms all the way in, and the bird has a little surveillance camera as its eyeball, and it wasn't a bird all along, but we should all know that because birds don't even exist.
Yeah, well, it's the second week in a row that came up, isn't it? So that's notable, and it's 2 Pixars in a row where it came up, so that's interesting.
Is this soft disclosure or what?
Maybe, although we do have to throw out that this is kind of a left field Pixar since Brad Bird was an outside man at the point. But I mean, come on, if you're making this movie, you're going to do the bird thing in any case, right? Whether you're disclosing something or not, that's just cool.
Brad Bird, we're on to you.
We are. It's in the name. Jeez, that's why they hired him.
and again, maybe the outsider thing was like, let's bring in this outsider guy. And he can have guns and violence and like all the things we normally don't do. Another thing lacking in this movie, which I guess we would have to mention at this point, is the lack of a Disney proxy. I couldn't figure out how to like ham fist in an example of any of that. The baby doesn't get kidnapped. The baby is well taken care of. In fact, there's really no kid at all. The only kid that gets any billing in here, aside from the baby for a tiny little scene, is Dash the son, but Dash is actually the one causing problems. And then the kids sneak on to their parents' missions, right? So it's like the opposite of instead of the kids getting abandoned, they see that their parents are going to abandon them, and they're like, nope, I'm coming along.
Right. And then they all, stare death in the eye. This movie really does go out of its way to be like, yes, the villains will kill kids. So I'm shoehorning the hell out of this, but if you're with your family and we're all going to die to this, I don't know. Is that a proxy of something? I guess not, because now everyone's dead if that works out. But you gotta have
the whole premise of the Disney proxy. To revisit it in case, because I guess it's been in most of the movies, but we rarely stop to explain it. But the Disney proxy is that you establish with the kid watching, if you presume there's a child watching the movie, and you plop them down in front of the TV and you leave the room to go do whatever adult stuff that you want to do, that the kid, you have actually just abandoned your actual child in the real world. You just abandoned him. You're out of sight, out of mind. And then in the movie that they're engrossed in, if they see the parent die, they're already relating subconsciously with my parents aren't here. And the movie locks it in and it just tells them, and they're never coming back. And that doesn't have to be something that they take so deep, but just while they're entrained in that and they're in this weird headspace cinema where the rest of the world doesn't exist, there's something in that soft brain, skull that's basically saying, no, your parents are actually dead. So then the first thing that you see after that sinks in is whatever the hell you're going to be selling on the lunchbox or the t-shirt or the Happy Meal. So this one, I guess it's the entire family all gets a Happy Meal toy, but it's considerably lacking that one particular aspect that seems like it was the most predictable part of the Disney formula. I wonder how well the ancillary sales of Incredibles action figures and Happy Meals toys and all those things did in comparison to if they had like a Disney proxy version of this.
Yeah, because Cars had, gangbusters on the merch. Nemo for sure. I did forget to mention Nemo, the Atlanta Aquarium, at least 10 years ago. I mean, I guess half the aquariums have a fake Nemo, but Atlanta's fake Nemo is called Depot, which I just thought that was funny. Deepo. So I like fake Nemos when you travel around. So everyone tries to get on that merch. The Incredibles, no one's trying to bootleg the Incredibles, I think. So
I heard the Compton Aquarium has a Debo.
Debo. Okay, sure. Why not? The weirdest aquarium I've been to did not have they had a clownfish tank, but it was an aquarium on top of a mountain. It was an aquarium at 2,500 meters. So that's kind of weird. Why would you put an aquarium on top of a mountain? They got to close in the winter,
I mean, we're on an aquarium tangent. I'll throw this one out there. I went to the Miami Aquarium as a kid, and I'm positive that they lied to me because I distinctly remember them telling us this, and it doesn't seem like this makes sense, and it never would have happened. But they told us that one of the employee, and I was, I don't know, 8, 9 or something, and I still remember this stupid story. They said that one of the employees was handling a sea urchin at the aquarium, and one of the little needles broke off and went into their finger, and it came out a month later, like out of their leg or something, implying that it had traversed their cardiovascular system somehow unscathed and then re-exited elsewhere. I don't even think that's possible because it would have to go like through your heart at some point, right? Anyways, the Miami Aquarium is out here lying to children. I just figured that you should know that.
Oh, that's too bad.
If that's possible and I just don't realize how that happened, like go ahead and let me know in the comments or whatever. But I swear that seems like it was even when they said it, and I was like, are you lying to us? Like, aren't you supposed to be in the position of being like an educator? This was like a class trip. Anyways, yeah, screw you, Miami Aquarium, and your lies.
Well, it's like when you're doing the same spiel day in, day out to kids, you got to make up a few things. I think the Universal Tram people are known to tell you false facts.
Worry more about implying. I guess it was like, don't touch one of these, but then I'm sure some kids were like, I want something to come out of my foot.
Yeah, I want to experience that. That would be amazing.
Well, they should have made up better stories about don't squeeze the sea cucumbers and the sea slugs, because that was tragic, is watching little kids just squeeze those freaking things to death constantly.
I know. I never wanted to touch things in the touch-in place. That sounds bad, but yeah, I don't want to touch the snake at the zoo. I'm gonna stand back. No, actually, when I was doing environmental education, I was doing a summer camp, and some guy, the reptile guy, came in, and I just went to the back of the room and stood there because I didn't really want to touch the reptiles. Although I have had a boa constrictor on my arm at one point, so I must have. That it was probably when I worked in South Carolina, and we found coral snakes living behind our cabinet. I was like kind of out on snakes at that point.
That seems like a special version of hell, though, that your entire existence is centered around children just touching you constantly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, I haven't I think we're going to get to that a little bit when we get to Finding Dory. I believe they kind of touch on that a bit, if I remember correctly.
Oh, boy. Okay.
We'll have a chance to.
I'll save my SeaWorld horror stories for then.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yes, by all means. I'm kind of getting to the end of my notes here. Yeah, the end of the movie, it's just it's kind of a what's the word I'm looking for? It's a romp, right? For the last 20 minutes, I kind of mostly stopped taking notes. Like, here's the big climax, here's some action, here's some adventure. I didn't read much into that. And at the end, they have our fake mole man with the Underminer, right? So makes you excited to see more, and then the movie ends, which I guess that's a good way to end your movie.
Yep, it's a serviceable superhero James Bondy kind of movie, and follows up that same way. I think a lot of the deep symbolism and like the subliminal or the undertones, at least, are all kind of in the very premise and the setup of all this. Once they actually start battling this grown-up Incrediboy, Buddy Pines, when she actually grows up to become the big bad, then the movie just starts following the rest of the formula a little bit. Now, his character, though, can you remind me what his super villain name? Syndrome, right? And he has the Omni droid, right? And Syndrome, he represents, quite obviously, not even like in an esoteric way, this like he explains exactly his entire trajectory, but he's not a superhero. He doesn't have super abilities, but he's super smart and he can invent things. So it's almost like the Beast, but without any of the cool turning into a beast part, like just the smart inventor part, right? Which doesn't exist even in Marvel and X-Men. You can't just be super smart unless you're like you can convince people that they're living in a different reality or something.
But just who Elon Musk wants to be,
right? Yeah, no, dude, this guy Syndrome is basically Elon Musk, right? He's just inventing these huge giant mech bots that he can then take back down and act like he was the hero, which I think is an interesting nod to like a literal false flag. They describe to children in this movie how a false flag works in a very clear and easy to understand way. They show that he's fighting this big monster, and then he'll say something like, "Oh, I'm going to take you down," and then it shows him using an app to like make the robot's arm fall off, and then he punches it, and it makes it look like the punch made it fall off. But this is probably one of the most succinct, like my child's first false flag documentaries that you can give to somebody. So for no other reason, this is great for that.
Yeah, the other big one, I guess, being the second of the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, Mysterio. They really push in, like even more so than the Incredibles, which is kind of interesting.
And this one too, it's a passing comment at the very beginning, but I thought it was just another interesting, like being very frank. And this was when Mr. Incredible gets in trouble the very first time, like right around the time all the lawsuits and stuff are happening. But his handler is telling him, hey guy, like we got to pay these families. We got to erase some memories out here. Like this is not like a zero-sum game. And the way that he just so casually is talking about bribing families about their deceased family members that were dying out of collateral damage or getting maimed or hurt or necks broken or whatever, but also that like, and we have to erase their memories. And again, if this is not Men in Black, right? Men in Black took place in late 90s, 2000s. They've got high-tech little devices. They're not superheroes. The CIA in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, their version of erasing your memory almost always included something involved with concussion research. So this was basically, we will punch you in your head until you forget it, or we will deprive your brain of oxygen until you forget it. So that quick little line that's in this movie, especially since it takes place in mid-century modern, you can't hear "we're going to erase their memories" and not hear "we are going to cause permanent brain damage so that they can't disclose some government secrets that they got privy to."
Yep, the darker end. You see, they whitewash that a little bit with Men in Black 3, right? Where they do go back to that period of time and it's just a clunkier neuralizer. It's still a neuralizer. We're not punching you in the head till you forget.
But they also show that Tommy Lee Jones' character has been reset so many times that like the next time might be the last time, and his brain just completely deteriorates. So
he's now a vegetable.
They do. I mean, honestly, they do kind of lean into that. It's like, oh, but on that 300th wipe, you kind of turn into Terry Schiavo.
As I said, I kind of got to the end of my notes here, but if you want to throw out anything else You said you had 20 bullet points. I don't know how many we hit.
We got through most of them. The other main one is just how this normalizes in the opening first minute or two, the whole concept of secret societies, secrecy, secret identities. I mean, that's kind of the vernacular of conspiracy theory talk, right? Is that there's these operatives out there that are pretending to be one thing and not the other. So superheroes again is kind of like the play school big tykes Duplo version of real political conspiracy. Like once your baby brain understands these alternate identities in the context of superheroes, you just escalate that one more level. And it's like, oh, and these are also just intelligence workers.
Well, that's the whole thing. The movie's not really hiding everything. It's disclosing everything, even if it's in one line. And here's some superheroes to distract you. So it's all there. It might just be one line, like you're saying, but it's not a very occulted movie, is it? It's all there in the movie,
right? But this it reflects this moment in time the same way that when we talk about the cartoons that would air in the late 80s and 90s, that they had this ubiquitous conspiracy vibe to them, that they didn't even necessarily have to explain what that guy in the background with the glasses and the wire in his ear that's like whispering into his wrist and then scurries away. Like you inherently know, oh, that's a Men in Black. Oh, there's a government or some secret agency doing this thing without any exposition. Like just seeing that, you know what it means because conspiracy was so ubiquitous. And this movie helps also perpetuate that a little bit in that it's like telling children now, hey, yeah, the 50s and 60s, these inside CIA domestic operations, not everything that they appear to be, which is a stark contrast from if you try to put this type of movie out in the actual 60s, like you'd find yourself on the opposite end of an anti-American council, right? Like Walt Disney would literally be ratting on you to the FBI and getting some kind of perks for it. But here we've got the exact opposite, which I mean, in my mind, this is the most mundane, boring, but real version of soft disclosure. This is them saying like, okay, everyone knows this, but you weren't allowed to say everyone knows this one generation ago.
Yeah. And it does seem that I guess this movie just has more of a laser focus because it's the most auteur we've had. It's the only one that definitely only had one director. Finding Nemo, 2 credited. Even in Toy Story days, I think it's John Lasseter, but then co-directed like right after. So Pixar was pretty much a committee, and this is kind of the first time where there's like, do what you want, and it worked pretty well. Again, this was not as gangbusters as the movie before and after it, but certainly no one was sobbing on the way to cash your check for this one. So,
I mean, I think this might be a good trend to start setting, but yeah, let's just compare it directly to the last movie we did. So in the most basic premise, Finding Nemo, I would say, is at least twice as good as The Incredibles.
I didn't feel that way in the 2000s. This, I'm a comic book geek. I like James Bond stuff. This one hit with me. I am thinking if I'm trying to be objective, that's probably correct. Except that I think the animation here is a little more polished, having watched them back to back. So, because I just loved this the first time I saw it late. I guess I first saw it on video because I didn't see it in the theater, but.
I remember the thing that I liked the most about this movie was how unlike any other Disney movie it seemed. It felt like a real movie. It felt like it wasn't being targeted to just babysit children, although clearly it kind of has that vibe a little bit to it, but it like was treating me like a real person with a real brain. Nemo did that too. In fact, I think Nemo did an even better job at that. But Nemo fit the typical mold of a Disney movie, way more Disney proxy, all that. Like I'm convinced that not even being aware of this Disney proxy sort of dynamic that keeps popping up, I'm sure after having just watched all these damn Disney movies as a kid, like my brain picked up on that pattern and it realized like, oh, there's something weird about this movie. I can't quite put my finger on it. And it's probably the lack of that Disney proxy. That's one of the biggest differentiators in every single Disney movie I've come to appreciate, that the ones that don't follow that proxy, they stand out so damn much. Like the ones that we see that, like Mulan is another really good example, even though that one technically it's a child leaving their parents, but she's an adult.
Yeah, for sure. I guess we'll start bringing to the tank today, unless you have anything else you want to spit on this movie. That was a weird way to say it.
Let's just spit all over this movie. No,
I'm gonna blame the wild pressure differentiations we've had around here. It's like hotter and hell and sunny, and then it's like a cool and downpouring rain. And I woke up this morning like feeling pretty stoned actually for no reason.
Nice.
It was kind of nice. It didn't feel bad, just like the world wasn't coming into focus, which, okay.
I guess my parting note on The Incredibles is this is a perfect time to go and look up Operation COINTELPRO if you haven't heard of that before. And if you have, you might not have heard of Operation Chaos. Look at Operation Chaos and compare that to The Incredibles, but also ask yourself, did they really coincidentally stop this the same year that they got found out for it? Or did they just change the name and start doing it more covertly? So if there's nothing else you take away from this movie breakdown of The Incredibles, it's look at Operation Chaos.
Oh, it's so easy to change names, right? Keep, Monsanto forever.
MK Delta, MK Naomi, Artichoke, Bluebird, MK Ultra,
Mockingbird.
Derby Hat. Yeah, what are you gonna do? Come on, we don't do that anymore. It's Derby Hat now. It's Third Chance now.
That must be the best job in the government, the guy that just makes up all the names for the projects. Because it's one guy that makes all the names, I'm sure.
The International Flag Committee. You just hire the one guy that does all the flags.
That's right. Before they check out those things, I guess they should check out your stuff, though. What's going on there? You just got your box of comics, yeah?
Yeah, ParanoidAmerican.com is the central hub of where I disseminate all my propaganda. The last big one that just delivered today was NASAcomic.com, which is my book called Never a Straight Answer that features Stanley Kubrick directing the Apollo 11 or all of the Apollo missions, essentially. And yeah, they're sweet. I got some foil covers and cool little variant covers and stuff. You didn't back it originally, you might not be able to get the foil ones, but the original cover and the comic itself is something you won't find anywhere else. You got to go and get it from ParanoidAmerican.com. I created it. I published it. I'm the only one selling it. So you got to come to me. I'm the only source for all of your hookups on this. And I have kind of done like a soft release, and I might end up doing an official announcement in like a month or so from now, but conspiracycards.com, which is a entire set of over 260 cards, although I've only got about 50 produced so far. Every new book, every new comic or game or anything that I put out, if it does through a crowdfunding campaign, I'll likely add another 6 to 10 cards to this set. So over the course of the next 10 releases, I'll add another 60 to 100 cards to the entire set. So that's kind of how it's been going. But we've got Robert Anton Wilson cards, Timothy McVeigh, Alex Jones, Isaac Cappy, Bill Hicks, because you got to have Alex Jones and Bill Hicks in the same set. I was about to ask that. Dr. Ewan Cameron, just all of the heavy hitting names, and some of the ones that you don't know: Werner von Braun, Rick Ross, Freeway Ricky Ross, the Iran-Contra scandal, all these things. And they're redone in parody forms of classic Fleer and Score and Upper Deck cards. Because I was obsessed with that era, like mid 80s to early 90s baseball cards. So conspiracycards.com. I'll sneak another one in, illuminaticomic.com. This one's actually going to be pretty big, where I think almost got 300 people signed up in the last 3 weeks. So clearly a lot of people care about the Bavarian Illuminati, as they should, as you should. And if you don't know or don't care, that's on you. And I'm going to fix that problem because I've made it as interesting as you will ever find any Bavarian Illuminati research presented. Every other option is going to require you to watch a 4 to 5 hour documentary. It's going to have ups and downs. You're going to have to read some old books that are going to be in German and Latin and have all sorts of deep political, or you can go to illuminaticomic.com and get an awesome comic book that breaks down all the same information, but in a funny, easy to digest way with amazing artwork. And it'll be the first and maybe only Paranoid pamphlet that's in full color. All the other ones have been in black and white, and they likely will be in black and white. This will have a black and white version, but it's also going to have a freaking color version. So how cool is that?
Alrighty. I guess I'll bop a bit on my end. I do lots of podcasting. Had a Patreon, Podcastius. You'll see those. Talk about the Twilight Zone, Time Enough Podcast. Just finished talking about Space 1999 on Podcast 1999. And a lot of films over at Films and Filth.
I like the way you said it. Films and Filth.
Yes. You got to get your phrasing down sometimes. As I said, pressure differentiations is rocking my brain today. It's kind of fun. Let the air pressure be your high, you know? That's what I'm doing today.
I mean, I can relate to that. In Florida, whenever you have like the weird hurricane and tropical storm warnings, a combination between the power going out and no longer being surrounded by electromagnetic fields from all angles and the air pressure just constantly fluctuating, it feels so surreal. I wouldn't say euphoric because you're also like, am I going to die? But if that part wasn't there, it would probably be euphoric.
Well, I'm having the more fun version of that today, I guess. So yay for me.
Look, you're going to have to move fast. Conspiracy cards from Paranoid American are here.
Conspiracy cards, flip it, what's the deal? Conspiracy cards with that paranoid seal. Pack it, unwrap it, truth in these stacks. Flip one, flip two, get a few of these packs. Flip it up, what's next? Move fake, we flex. Bigfoot in the woods, stay lying, that's facts. MK Ultra, no cap. Every after the one is a trap. Roswell crash, what's that? They hide the truth, where's that? Conspiracy cards, flip it, what's the deal? Conspiracy cards with that paranoid seal. Pack it, unwrap it, truth in these stacks. Flip one, flip two, get a few of these packs.
That's right, Conspiracy Cards from Paranoid American. A set of over 200 cards featuring legendary conspiracy theorists, cult leaders, esoteric secrets, and more. For more details, visit conspiracycards.com today.
Paranoid. Yo. I scribble my life away, driven to write the page. Will it enlighten your brain? Give you the flight, my plane, paper the highs ablaze. Somewhat of an amazing feel when it's real to real. You will engage it. Your favorite, of course, the Lord of an arrangement. I gave you the proper results to hit the pavement. If they get emotional, hey, maybe your language, the game, how they playing it well without Lakers. Evade them, whatever the cost, they are the shapeshift. Snakes get decapitated, met is the apex. Execution of flame you out, nuclear bomb distributed at war, rather gruesome for eyes to see. Max them out, then I light my trees. Blow it off in the face, you're despising me for what though? Calculated and rather cutthroat. Paranoid American must be all the blunt smoke for real. Lord, give me a day away, vacate. They wait around to hate whatever they say. Man, it's not in the least bit. We get heavy rotate when a beat hits, so thank us, you're welcome. Fuck the niggas for real, you're welcome. They ain't never had a deal, you're welcome. Man, they lacking appeal, you're welcome. Yet they doing it still, you're welcome.